My name is Kylie. I'm 27 years old, and I've been financially supporting my family since I graduated college 5 years ago. Last month, during an explosive argument, my father screamed in my face that I give nothing to our family. Can you imagine? After paying their mortgage, utilities, and more for years. Then he kicked me out of the house I was paying for. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I stopped paying everything. Within weeks, their lives started falling apart without me. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button to see how I finally reclaimed my power and self-worth. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Denver, Colorado. From the outside, we seemed like your typical American family, but behind closed doors, financial stress was a constant shadow over our household. My father, Harold, always had big dreams, but struggled to maintain stable employment. Despite his financial shortcomings, he maintained rigid traditional views about gender roles, believing men should be providers, while women should be supportive and not outshine their husbands or fathers. My mother, Diana, was the definition of passive. She worked part-time at a local department store, but devoted most of her energy to keeping peace in the family. This usually meant appeasing my father and avoiding confrontation at all costs. When Harold would go on tirades about money troubles, she would just quietly nod and later tell us kids that Dad is just stressed, or times are tough right now. Then there was my younger brother, Jason. 4 years younger than me, and the only boy Jason grew up with different rules and expectations. While I was taught to be self-sufficient, Jason was coddled. My parents, especially my father, excused his laziness as boys will be boys. By the time Jason turned 24, he had bounced between 5 different jobs, never lasting more than a few months at each one. Still, my parents never pushed him to be more responsible. My youngest sibling, Zoe, is 19 and currently in college. She's always been caught in the middle, understanding the unfairness of our family dynamics, but too afraid to speak up against our father. We shared many late-night conversations where she would express her frustration about how differently we were treated compared to Jason, but in front of our parents, she remained quiet. Unlike Jason, I knew from an early age that if I wanted anything in life, I would have to work for it myself. My parents helped with basic needs, but extras like class trips, prom dresses, and eventually college tuition were mostly on me. I started working at 16, balancing school and part-time jobs at the local grocery store and then a coffee shop. College was a struggle financially, but I was determined to get my marketing degree. I worked 30 hours a week while maintaining a full course load. There were countless nights of studying until dawn after closing shifts, but I graduated with honors. My parents attended my graduation ceremony, but their congratulations felt perfunctory. My father's main comment was, "Now you can get a real job and help out around here." At 22, I landed my first professional position at Market Edge, a mid-sized marketing firm. The starting salary wasn't impressive, but it was steady income with health benefits and growth potential. I was ecstatic. Finally, my hard work was paying off. I imagined saving for my own apartment building an emergency fund, maybe even planning a vacation. I had never been anywhere outside Colorado. What I didn't expect was how quickly my income would become essential to my family's survival. It started small. My father asked if I could chip in for the electric bill one month when his contracting work was slow. Then came requests to help with the water bill. Then the internet. Each time the request was framed as temporary, just until my father's work picked up. By my second year at Market Edge, I was paying for all the utilities plus groceries. The requests had evolved into expectations. If I questioned any expense, my father would remind me that they had raised me for 18 years, and now it was my turn to contribute to the family. My mother would add that families support each other, her gentle voice making me feel guilty for even hesitating. Jason, meanwhile, contributed virtually nothing. His occasional paychecks went toward his car payments, video games, and nights out with friends. When I brought this up, my parents would defend him, saying he was still finding himself, and that boys take longer to mature. Despite the financial strain, part of me felt good about helping my family. I was raised to believe family comes first, and seeing relief on my mother's face when bills were paid on time gave me a sense of purpose. But another part of me watched my peers buying homes, traveling abroad, advancing their education, all things that felt increasingly out of reach for me. By the 5-year mark, the unspoken arrangement had solidified. I was the family's financial backbone, silently shouldering burdens while receiving little recognition. Every time I considered moving out or reducing my contributions, guilt held me back. How could I pursue my own dreams while my family struggled? What kind of daughter would that make me? Looking back, I can see how my family's dependency on me grew so gradually that I barely noticed as the weight increased. Like a frog in slowly heating water, I didn't realize I was being boiled alive until it was almost too late. My 25th birthday should have been a celebration. I had just been promoted to senior marketing specialist at Market Edge with a significant salary increase and more responsibility managing client accounts. The promotion came after I led a successful campaign that brought in 3 major clients. My colleagues took me out for drinks after work, toasting my success and bright future. When I arrived home that evening, rather than congratulations, I was greeted with an overdue mortgage notice on the kitchen counter and my father's expectation that I would cover it. "With your raise, this shouldn't be a problem now," he said matter-of-factly. I still remember staring at him in disbelief. How did he even know about my raise? I hadn't told anyone in my family yet. Later, I learned my mother had overheard me on a phone call discussing it with Audrey, my best friend. Instead of congratulating me, my parents had immediately calculated how much more I could contribute to the household. That was the beginning of a new phase. Soon, I wasn't just covering utilities and groceries. I was making mortgage payments, paying property taxes, covering car insurance for the family vehicles, and even funding my father's cell phone plan with unlimited data so he could stay connected for work opportunities. My brother Jason's entitlement reached new heights during this period. After losing yet another job, this time at a warehouse because he didn't like the manager's attitude, he spent 3 months unemployed. During this time, he expected me to cover his car payment and give him spending money. "Come on, sis," he would say. "It's not like you have kids to support, you can spare it." That same year, my father came to me with a business opportunity that he was sure would turn our family's finances around. He wanted to start a home renovation company focusing on kitchen remodels. All he needed was $15,000 for tools, a work truck, and initial marketing. Against my better judgment and despite warnings from both Audrey and my then-boyfriend Thomas, I withdrew money from my modest investment account to fund my father's dream. 6 months later, after completing only 2 jobs, both for friends who were disappointed with the results, the business folded. My father blamed market conditions, unreliable suppliers, and clients who didn't know what they wanted. Not once did he acknowledge his lack of business planning or the financial hit I took. Those $15,000 vanished along with my hopes of attending graduate school the following year. Throughout all this, my mother remained a silent enabler. When I would break down from stress, she would pat my hand and say, "You've always been our strong one, Kylie, the responsible one. We're so blessed to have you." Her words meant as comfort only reinforced the unfair expectations placed on my shoulders. The personal sacrifices mounted. I postponed moving out, sharing a bedroom with Zoe despite being a professional woman in my mid-20s. I canceled plans for a 2-week Europe trip I had been saving for since college. I put my graduate school applications on hold indefinitely. I broke up with Thomas after he issued an ultimatum about my family's drain on our relationship. The resentment grew like a slow-spreading poison. I would lie awake at night calculating how much money I had given my family and what I could have done with it for my own life. I became irritable, snapping at coworkers over minor issues. My performance at work began to suffer, putting my hard-earned position at risk. When I tried to discuss fair financial arrangements with my family, the conversations invariably turned against me. My father would puff up indignantly, asking if I thought I was too good for my family now that I had a fancy office job. My mother would tear up, whispering about how she had hoped we would always be a close family. Jason would roll his eyes and mutter about me being a control freak. The worst part was how my contributions were simultaneously essential and invisible. My father would complain about bills in one breath and criticize my career choices in the next. "Marketing isn't a real job," he once said during dinner. "Anyone can make advertisements." This after I had just paid for the very food on his plate. My mental health deteriorated steadily. I developed insomnia and anxiety attacks. Finally, at Audrey's insistence, I started seeing Dr. Sarah, a therapist specializing in family dynamics. In our sessions, Dr. Sarah helped me recognize the exploitative patterns in my family relationships. What you're describing is financial abuse, she told me during our third session. The fact that it's coming from parents toward a child rather than between romantic partners doesn't make it any less harmful. Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. I had never considered myself a victim of abuse. In my mind, abuse meant visible bruises or screaming matches, not the quiet expectation that I would sacrifice my future for my family's comfort. But they're my family, I protested weakly. Isn't it my responsibility to help them? Dr. Sarah's response changed everything. Helping family is supporting them through difficult times while they actively work to improve their situation. What you're describing is enabling dependency while they make little effort to change. There's a critical difference. Slowly, with Dr. Sarah's guidance, I began to see how my family had come to view me not as a daughter or sister, but as a financial resource to be tapped without limit or gratitude. The realization was both liberating and devastating. Something would have to change, but I had no idea the breaking point would come so dramatically or so soon. The day that changed everything started like many others. It was a Wednesday in April, and I had just survived one of the most stressful workdays in recent memory. A major client had threatened to pull their account after miscommunication about campaign deliverables. I had spent hours in damage control meetings finally resolving the issue, but emerging emotionally drained. All I wanted was to come home, take a hot shower, and collapse into bed. Instead, I pulled into our driveway to find my car, the one I had loaned to Jason, while his was being repaired with a massive dent in the passenger side door. Jason was in the living room playing video games when I walked in. When I questioned him about the car, he barely looked up from his game. "Some idiot in the mall parking lot," he shrugged. "Not my fault." "Did you at least get their insurance information?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Nah, they drove off. Anyway, it's just a car, Kylie. Chill out." Just a car that I was still making payments on. Just a car that I needed to look professional for client meetings. Just a car that I had specifically told him to be careful with. But before I could respond, I noticed a bank notification on my phone. My emergency savings account balance was substantially lower than it should have been. Puzzled, I opened the banking app to find a withdrawal of $3,000 made that morning in person at a branch across town. I felt sick. I had never shared my banking passwords with anyone. The only other person with access to that account was my mother, whom I had added as an authorized user years ago during a period when I traveled frequently for work. I found my parents in the kitchen, my father reading a newspaper while my mother prepared dinner. "Did one of you withdraw money from my emergency fund today?" I asked, my voice shaking. My father lowered his newspaper slowly. "I had your mother take out a loan from your account. We need to replace the furnace before next winter." "A loan?" I echoed in disbelief. "You didn't ask me, you just took it." "You would have said yes anyway," my father replied dismissively. "Besides, it's not like you're using that money, it's just sitting there." That was the moment something snapped inside me. All the years of sacrifice, unacknowledged support, and taken for granted contributions crystallized into a white-hot rage that I could no longer contain. "That money was for emergencies," I said, my voice rising. "My emergencies. Not for you to decide how to spend." My father's face darkened. "Watch your tone, young lady. You're still in my house." "The house I pay the mortgage on," I shot back, surprising even myself with my boldness. "The house that would have been foreclosed on last year if not for my contributions." My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Is that what you think? That we owe you? That we should grovel in gratitude because you help out with a few bills?" "A few bills." I was practically shouting now. "I pay the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, the car insurance. I funded your failed business. I've put my entire life on hold to keep this family afloat." My mother tried to intervene, her voice trembling. "Kylie, please, your father doesn't mean—" "Don't speak for me, Diana." My father cut her off. Then turning back to me, his face flushed with anger, he delivered the words that would change our relationship forever. "You give nothing to our family, nothing but money which you throw in our faces at every opportunity. Where's your respect? Where's your gratitude for everything we've done for you?" I stood there stunned into silence. Jason had wandered into the kitchen, attracted by the shouting, a smirk playing on his lips as he watched the confrontation. "You think your fancy job and your money make you better than us?" My father continued, his voice dripping with disdain. "Well, let me tell you something. There's more to family than paying bills. There's loyalty, respect, things you clearly know nothing about." Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Respect. Is that what you call taking my money without asking? Is that what you call letting Jason wreck my car without consequences?" "That was an accident," my mother protested weakly. "Everything is an accident or exception when it comes to Jason," I retorted. "But when it's me, I'm expected to be perfect, responsible for everyone." My father slammed his hand on the table. "If you're so unhappy here, if we're such a burden on your precious life, then maybe you should just leave." The kitchen fell silent. Even Jason looked surprised. "Harold," my mother whispered, but he ignored her. "You heard me," my father continued, his gaze locked with mine. "If we're not good enough for you, then go. See how you like building a life all on your own without family to support you." In that moment, I realized a devastating truth: my father would rather lose me than acknowledge his own failures or change the dynamic that benefited him. I was valuable only as long as I provided financial support without questioning the arrangement. With hands shaking, I turned and walked upstairs to my shared bedroom. I pulled out a suitcase and began throwing in essential clothes, toiletries, and important documents. Zoe came in halfway through my packing, her eyes wide with alarm. "Kylie, what happened? Where are you going?" "Dad kicked me out," I said simply, unable to elaborate through the tightness in my throat. Zoe sat on her bed watching me pack with tears streaming down her face. "This is so wrong. You're the only one who keeps everything together around here." I hugged her tightly before grabbing my suitcase. "I'll call you tomorrow," I promised. As I walked back through the kitchen toward the front door, my parents and Jason stood watching in apparent disbelief. Perhaps they hadn't expected me to actually leave. Perhaps they thought the prospect of being alone would frighten me into apologizing and to falling back in line. My father's expression was a complex mixture of anger and surprise. My mother looked stricken but remained silent as always. Jason's smirk had faded, replaced by uncertainty. "Kylie, don't be dramatic," my father said, his tone slightly less confident. "Sit down and let's discuss this reasonably." But it was too late. The spell was broken. I opened the front door and stepped outside, the cool evening air filling my lungs as I walked to my dented car. As I drove away, tears finally spilled down my cheeks. Tears of anger, betrayal, grief, but also unexpectedly relief. For the first time in years, I felt a weight lifting. Whatever came next would be painful, but at least it would be on my own terms. The first week after leaving my family home was a blur of emotion. My best friend Audrey immediately offered her spare bedroom when I called her in tears from a coffee shop parking lot. "Stay as long as you need," she insisted. "No questions asked." But Audrey did ask questions, gentle ones, as we stayed up late that first night with cups of tea at her kitchen table. Having witnessed my family dynamics over the years, she wasn't entirely surprised by the blow-up, only that it had taken so long to happen. "I've watched you pour yourself into that black hole for years," she said, passing me another tissue. "They take and it's never enough." The next morning, the emotional numbness gave way to practical concerns. Where would I live long term? What about my belongings, still at the house? And most pressingly, what about all the financial commitments I had been making for my family? That afternoon, I called Marcus, a financial advisor. I had consulted once before about retirement planning. I explained my situation in halting, embarrassed words, feeling like a failure for having allowed myself to be financially exploited for so long. Marcus was professional and non-judgmental, asking practical questions about what payments I was responsible for and what automatic withdrawals were set up from my accounts. As we compiled the list, the magnitude of my financial support became painfully clear. "Based on what you've shared," Marcus said carefully, "you've been contributing approximately 70% of your income to your family's expenses. That's approximately $42,000 annually, not including one-time expenditures like your father's business venture." The figure stunned me into silence. $42,000 a year. For 5 years. Over $200,000 that could have gone toward my own home, advanced education, investments, travel, or just peace of mind. The first thing we need to do, Marcus continued, is secure your finances. Change all passwords, remove your mother as an authorized user on your accounts, and redirect any automatic payments to manual status so you can decide what to continue. The decision to stop financial support wasn't made lightly. That night I sat on Audrey's balcony until dawn, weighing the guilt of potentially leaving my family in financial distress against the clear reality that the situation was unsustainable and unhealthy. By morning, I had made my decision. With shaking hands, I called each utility company, the mortgage lender, the insurance companies, and every other service I had been paying for. Some payments I canceled outright. Others I set to end after 30 days, giving my family some transition time. With each call, the knot of anxiety in my chest loosened slightly. By the time I hung up from the last call, I felt lighter than I had in years, despite the circumstances. Predictably, the first contact from my family came that same day, just hours after I canceled the automatic payments. My father's text was curt. The mortgage payment didn't go through. Fix it. No apology, no acknowledgement of our fight, just an expectation that I would continue financial support despite being told to leave. I didn't respond. The next day brought 3 missed calls from my mother, followed by a voicemail full of sighs and passive-aggressive guilt. Kylie, honey, I know you're upset, but punishing the whole family like this isn't like you. Your father didn't mean what he said. You know how he gets when he's stressed. On the third day, Jason texted, WTF. My credit card was declined. I was in the middle of dinner with friends. Super embarrassing. Sort this out. I had forgotten that I was paying the minimum on Jason's credit card, a temporary arrangement from 2 years ago that had never ended. I blocked his number without responding. The only call that I answered was from Zoe. Unlike the others, her concern seemed genuine. Are you okay? She asked immediately. Everyone here is freaking out, but no one's talking about why you left or how you're feeling. We talked for almost an hour. Zoe described the chaos at home with our parents arguing constantly, and Jason stomping around the house complaining about his ungrateful sister. She also confided that for the first time our mother had questioned some of our father's decisions. It's weird seeing Mom stand up to Dad even a little bit, Zoe said. Yesterday she actually asked him why he never pushed Jason to keep a job. Dad didn't know what to say. That conversation was the one bright spot in an otherwise emotionally turbulent week. With Dr. Sarah's help during 2 emergency therapy sessions, I worked through the guilt that threatened to drive me back into the same dysfunctional patterns. The guilt you're feeling, she told me, was programmed into you as a control mechanism. Recognize it for what it is. By the end of the week, I had found a small but clean 1-bedroom apartment in a different part of town, signed a 6-month lease, and begun the process of building my independent life. Audrey and 2 other friends helped me shop for essential furniture at secondhand stores. We made an adventure of it, celebrating each small acquisition as a victory. The most striking realization came when I received my next paycheck. For the first time in years, I didn't immediately calculate how much would go to family expenses. The entire amount was mine to manage for my own needs and future. I opened a new savings account and set up an automatic transfer for 20% of each paycheck, the beginning of rebuilding my emergency fund and planning for graduate school. That night, I slept in my own apartment, in my own bed, under my own roof. Despite everything, I felt the first tentative stirrings of hope. This wasn't how I had imagined striking out on my own, but perhaps it was how it needed to happen. The painful severance had freed me to discover who I could be when not defined by family obligation. 2 weeks after leaving my family home, the first serious consequences of my financial withdrawal began to materialize. My father called repeatedly one Tuesday evening, something he had never done before. When I finally answered, his tone was markedly different from his previous messages. Kylie, he said, the usual authority in his voice replaced by poorly concealed panic. There's been some kind of mistake with the utilities. We got shut-off notices for electricity and water. That's not a mistake, I replied, my heart pounding despite my resolved tone. I'm no longer paying those bills. A long silence followed. You can't be serious, he finally said. It's the middle of summer. Your mother can't handle the heat without air conditioning. The attempt to use my mother's comfort as leverage was exactly what Dr. Sarah had warned me to expect. "I'm sure you'll figure something out," I said. "You could start by checking the balance of your checking account, which I'm guessing is not empty." My father's sputtering response confirmed my suspicion. Despite years of claiming financial hardship, my parents had maintained their own money separate from household expenses, which they left to me. They had been perfectly capable of covering at least some bills, but had chosen not to as long as I was willing. Later that week, Zoe texted me photos of late payment notices spread across the kitchen counter. "Dad's freaking out," she wrote. "He kept saying he had no idea how expensive everything is." "How could he not know?" I texted back. "He's seen the bills." "I don't think he ever actually looked at them," Zoe replied. "He just handed them to you." The revelation was both infuriating and validating. My father hadn't even bothered to know what I was paying for. My contributions had been simultaneously essential and invisible. By the 3-week mark, Zoe reported that our parents had drained their modest savings account to cover immediate expenses. My mother, who had worked part-time for years, mainly to get out of the house, had asked for full-time hours at the department store. After 15 years of my father insisting that his contract work was sufficient for the family, he was now scrambling to find steady employment. The most dramatic development came when the family's second car, the one Jason primarily used, was repossessed. I learned about it from Audrey, whose mother lived in my parents' neighborhood and had witnessed the tow truck in the driveway. "Your brother was chasing after the tow truck in his pajamas," Audrey relayed with a mixture of sympathy and satisfaction. "Apparently, he hasn't made payments in 3 months." I had been covering the insurance but wasn't aware Jason had stopped paying for the car itself. Another example of how financial responsibility had been unceremoniously shifted to my shoulders whenever possible. The family home, once maintained in at least surface-level order to keep up appearances for neighbors, began to show signs of neglect. The lawn grew shaggy, the flower beds I had tended went unwatered, and a broken gutter remained unrepaired after a storm. A neighbor I remained friendly with texted me, "Everything okay with your folks? Place is looking rough. Your dad used to be so particular about the yard." The truth, which I was only now fully appreciating, was that my father had been particular with my labor and money, not his own. The immaculate yard had been maintained by gardeners I paid for as a gift to my mother. 5 weeks after leaving, I received an unexpected call from my Uncle Frank, my father's older brother. Frank and my father had a strained relationship, with my father often complaining about Frank's holier-than-thou attitude because he had a successful plumbing business. "Kylie," Frank said after awkward greetings, "I got a call from your dad yesterday. First time in years he's reached out. He asked for a loan." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I remained silent. "I'm not calling to make you feel bad," Frank continued. "Actually, I wanted to say it's about time Harold faced reality. My brother has been living beyond his means on someone else's dime for too long." Frank's validation was surprisingly emotional for me. For years, I had assumed I was the problem, that my growing resentment was a character flaw rather than a reasonable response to exploitation. Meanwhile, Jason's situation was deteriorating rapidly. According to Zoe, he had finally gotten a job at a local warehouse, the same one he had quit previously. The manager had rehired him reluctantly and with reduced pay. Jason was now carpooling with a coworker, a situation he described as humiliating. My parents' credit cards were approaching their limits. The premium cable package had been canceled. The meal delivery service I had signed them up for as a Christmas gift had ended. The small luxuries that had been taken for granted were disappearing one by one. The most concerning development came 6 weeks after my departure, when Zoe called to tell me our father had experienced chest pains and briefly visited the emergency room. "The doctor said it was stress-related," she explained. "Dad's blood pressure is really high. They gave him medication, but he's worried about paying for it long-term." I felt a pang of worry despite everything. Whatever his failings, he was still my father. "Is he going to be okay?" "Physically, probably," Zoe said. "But he's different now, quieter. Sometimes I catch him just staring at bills with this lost look. I think he finally realizes what you were handling all this time." That conversation left me conflicted. I didn't want my family to suffer, especially not with health issues. But I also recognized that the current hardships were the natural consequences of years of financial irresponsibility consequences that had been artificially deferred by my intervention. As Zoe's updates continued over the following days, a picture emerged of a family being forced into long overdue maturity. My mother was taking more initiative with household management. My father was swallowing his pride to apply for jobs he would have previously dismissed as beneath him. Even Jason was showing up to work consistently, if resentfully. The irony wasn't lost on me. In my absence, my family was finally developing the financial responsibility I had been lectured about for years. It seemed they had always been capable of managing their lives, they had simply found it more convenient to have me do it instead. 6 weeks and 3 days after walking out of my family home, I received a text message from my father that I had to read several times to believe. "Kylie, we need to talk as a family. Can we meet Saturday at 2 p.m., your choice of location?" The acknowledgement that I should choose the meeting place was a small but significant departure from my father's usual approach of summoning family members to him. After consulting with Dr. Sarah, I agreed to the meeting, but suggested a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between my apartment and their house. I spent the days leading up to the meeting in a state of anxiety role-playing different scenarios with Dr. Sarah and Audrey. Would my father demand I resume financial support? Would he apologize? Would the meeting devolve into accusations and end with our relationship in even worse shape? "Remember," Dr. Sarah advised during our session the day before the meeting, "you are not responsible for their emotions or reactions. You are only responsible for expressing your boundaries clearly and respectfully." On Saturday, I arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early to secure a corner table with some privacy. I ordered a latte and tried to calm my racing heart by reviewing the notes I had prepared about what I wanted to say. My family arrived precisely at 2, filing into the coffee shop like a somber procession. The physical changes in them after just 6 weeks were striking. My father looked older, the lines in his face deeper, his confident posture diminished. My mother seemed simultaneously more tired and more alert, her eyes darting around the coffee shop nervously. Jason slouched behind them, hands in pockets, determinedly avoiding eye contact. Zoe brought up the rear, giving me a small, encouraging smile. After awkward greetings and the ordering of drinks, we settled into an uncomfortable silence. For once, my father seemed at a loss for words, stirring his black coffee endlessly while staring at the table. Finally, my mother spoke. "Kylie, we've missed you." The simple statement, which avoided both blame and the real issues at hand, was so typically her that I almost smiled despite myself. "I've missed aspects of being with family too," I replied carefully. "But I haven't missed the financial pressure or feeling taken for granted." My father cleared his throat. "That's actually why we wanted to meet." His voice, usually commanding and certain, wavered slightly. "The past weeks have been educational." Jason snorted at this understatement but fell silent after a sharp look from our mother. "We didn't realize," my father continued with visible effort, "the extent of what you were managing for the household. The bills, the mortgage, all of it. It was more than we understood." Coming from a man who had never acknowledged any failure or misjudgment in my memory, this was extraordinary. I waited, sensing there was more. "When you left," my mother added softly, "everything fell apart so quickly. We weren't prepared. We didn't have systems in place. We didn't even know the passwords for half the accounts." "Because you never wanted to know," I pointed out, trying to keep accusation from my tone. "I offered to show you our family budget multiple times. You always said it was handled and changed the subject." My father's face flushed, but surprisingly he nodded. "That's true. I didn't want to see it because then I'd have to admit how much we were depending on you, how much I was failing as a provider." The admission hung in the air between us, weightier than any apology could have been. Jason, who had been examining his fingernails with excessive interest, finally looked up. "For what it's worth, my new boss is a hard ass and the work sucks. But I'm still there, 6 weeks straight now." His tone was defensive, but there was a hint of genuine pride beneath it. "That's good," I said sincerely. "I'm glad to hear it." Zoe reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We're trying, Kylie, all of us. It's different now." I believed her, but I also knew how easily old patterns could reassert themselves. "What exactly are you asking of me?" I said, addressing my father directly. "Why did you want this meeting?" My father exchanged glances with my mother before answering. We need help getting back on track, not like before," he added hastily, seeing my expression harden. "We're not asking you to take over everything again, but guidance. Maybe some temporary assistance while we get systems in place." I had anticipated this request and prepared for it. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out a folder with printed documents. "I've thought a lot about my relationship with this family." I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I love you all, but the dynamic we had was destroying me. I was giving up my future to subsidize a lifestyle that wasn't even making anyone happy." No one contradicted me, which itself was remarkable. "If I'm going to have any relationship with you going forward, things need to change fundamentally. Not temporarily, not partially, but completely and permanently." I opened the folder and laid out 3 documents. This first paper is a breakdown of all the household expenses I was covering with suggestions for how to reduce or manage each one. The second is a basic family budget that aligns with your actual income, not with what I was contributing. My father picked up the first document, his eyebrows rising as he scanned the comprehensive list. "The third document," I continued, my heart pounding, "outlines my terms for providing limited financial assistance during a 3-month transition period." My mother looked up hopefully. "You'll help us." "With conditions," I said firmly. "First, I will pay exactly 20% of the mortgage for 3 months. Not a penny more, and it ends completely after 3 months. Second, every adult in the household must be employed and contributing proportionally to expenses. That includes you, Jason." My brother frowned but nodded reluctantly. "Third, I will help set up and teach you to use budgeting software, but you must actually use it and have weekly family finance meetings. Fourth, I need acknowledgement from everyone here that what happened before was inappropriate and harmful, not just to my finances, but to my well-being and to my relationship with all of you." I paused, looking at each family member in turn. "And finally, I will not be guilt-tripped, manipulated, or made to feel responsible for financial problems that are not of my making. If that happens even once, all support ends immediately." The silence that followed was profound. I had never spoken to my family this way before, with absolute clarity about my boundaries and expectations. Part of me expected my father to explode with indignation, or my mother to dissolve into tears. Instead, something unexpected happened. My father nodded slowly. "These are fair terms," he said quietly. "More than fair given everything." The simple acknowledgement nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. For the first time, my father was seeing me not as a resource to be tapped or a subordinate to be directed, but as an adult with legitimate needs and boundaries. My mother wiped away tears but nodded in agreement. "We'll do whatever it takes to make things right, honey." Jason examined the budget document with an expression of discomfort that gradually shifted to resignation. "This means I need to contribute like half my paycheck to the house." "That's what adults do," I replied simply. "They pay their share." For a moment I thought he might argue, but he just sighed and muttered, "Fine." Zoe beamed at me across the table, pride evident in her expression. Later, she would tell me it was the first time she had seen anyone successfully stand up to our father, and it had changed her own understanding of what was possible in relationships. As the meeting concluded with tentative plans for implementing the new arrangements, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication that my family finally recognized the inappropriateness of their financial dependence. Cautious hope that genuine change might be possible. Sadness for the years lost to unhealthy dynamics. But beneath it all, a profound sense of having reclaimed my power and set the stage for healthier relationships moving forward. Walking back to my car after saying goodbye, I realized something significant had shifted inside me. The overwhelming guilt that had plagued me since leaving home had diminished, replaced by a growing confidence in my right to prioritize my own well-being. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I felt truly free to build a future on my own terms. 6 months have passed since that coffee shop meeting, and the transformation in my family and in myself has been remarkable. The 3-month transition period I established came and went, with my family gradually taking full responsibility for their finances as promised. There were stumbling blocks along the way, certainly, but the changes have largely held. My father found steady employment with a construction company working under a manager rather than trying to be his own boss. The position came with health benefits, which eased one of the family's major financial stressors. More significantly, he's different now. The experience of nearly losing everything, including his relationship with me, humbled him in ways I never thought possible. 2 months ago, he invited me to lunch, just the two of us. After awkward small talk, he said something I never expected to hear. "I failed you as a father, Kylie. Instead of protecting you and preparing you for success, I exploited your sense of responsibility. I'm trying to understand why I did that, and I'm committed to being different going forward." His words weren't perfect, and decades of difficult dynamics won't be resolved with one conversation, but it was a start, a genuine acknowledgement that set the stage for a new kind of relationship between us. My mother has perhaps undergone the most surprising transformation. Her full-time position at the department store led to a promotion to assistant manager. The regular paycheck and workplace recognition have given her a confidence I've never seen before. She's started speaking up at home too, no longer serving merely as a buffer between my father's moods and the rest of the family. Last month, she called me specifically to share that she had opened her own bank account separate from the joint account she shares with my father. "I should have done this years ago," she told me. "Having my own money, even a small amount, makes me feel secure in a way I never have before." Jason predictably has had the rockiest adjustment. He lost the warehouse job after a dispute with a coworker, but unlike in the past, immediately found another position rather than lounging unemployed. He's still immature in many ways, still prone to complaining about adult responsibilities, but he's paying his share of household expenses consistently. Small steps, but meaningful ones. Zoe and I have grown closer through this whole experience. Now in her junior year of college, she calls me regularly for advice about classes, internships, and building her own financial independence. "You're my role model," she told me recently. "I want to be as brave as you." As for me, my life has expanded in ways I couldn't have imagined when I was drowning in family obligations. I moved to a nicer apartment closer to work. I started taking evening classes toward my MBA, something I had postponed for years. I've even begun dating again recently, meeting a kind and self-sufficient man named Garrett, who respects my boundaries and ambitions. My relationship with my family is fundamentally different now. We gather for Sunday dinner twice a month, but I no longer feel responsible for solving everyone's problems. We can enjoy each other's company without the undercurrent of financial tension that previously poisoned our interactions. The healing hasn't been linear or perfect. There are still moments when old patterns try to reassert themselves. My father occasionally slips into his authoritative tone when discussing family matters. My mother sometimes makes passive-aggressive comments about how rarely they see me now. Jason has asked for small loans twice, which I declined, holding firm to my boundaries. But the difference is that now I can recognize these behaviors for what they are and address them directly, rather than absorbing the guilt and responsibility. And surprisingly, my family is learning to adjust when I point out these lapses. My therapist, Dr. Sarah, helped me understand that the crisis that forced me out of my family home was actually the catalyst for healing that had been needed for years. Sometimes systems have to break down completely before they can be rebuilt in a healthier way, she explained. The most profound change has been internal. I no longer define my worth by what I can provide for others. I've learned that true family support is reciprocal and respectful, not one-sided exploitation justified by blood ties. I've discovered that setting boundaries isn't selfish, but essential for authentic relationships. The painful rupture with my family taught me that sometimes walking away is necessary for everyone's growth. By refusing to continue unhealthy patterns, I forced change that ultimately benefited not just me, but my entire family. My father is healthier and more honest about his limitations. My mother is more independent. Jason is gradually maturing. Zoe has a model for healthy relationships she didn't have before. As I look toward the future, I feel a sense of openness and possibility that once seemed unattainable. My savings account is growing again. Graduate school is becoming a reality rather than a distant dream. I'm learning to prioritize my needs without guilt. Family relationships are always works in progress, evolving as we grow and change. The painful chapter we went through was necessary, a difficult passage to a healthier connection. While I would never have chosen that particular breaking point, I'm grateful for the growth it catalyzed in all of us. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family obligation and your own well-being? What boundaries have you set to protect yourself while maintaining relationships with loved ones? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about reclaiming your power in challenging relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most necessary healing.